So inshallah, what we'll do next for the next 20 minutes or so is to have a question and answer session and a discussion. But I'm going to take the prerogative as the MC to ask the first two questions, inshallah, and then we'll go to the audience from there. The first question is to Sister Aisha. You know, Sheikh Umar mentioned Al-Hajj Malik Shabaz's statement, "Who taught you to hate yourself?" Aisha, what in your mind does our community need to overcome that?
Education, Allah, repentance, but some deep internal reflection. I want to read something. I just recently returned from Bangladesh, and I was in their Liberation Museum. And while I was in their Liberation Museum, I saw this quote that I was like, I have to share this quote with you guys. And it's by Lord Macaulay, who was the British Prime Minister. He was the British Parliament at the time. He says, "I have traveled across two lengths and breadth of India, and I have not seen one beggar or thief. Such wealth I have seen in this country, such high moral values, people of such caliber, that I do not think we would ever conquer this country unless we are able to break the very backbone of this country, which is to hurt its spiritual and cultural heritage, and therefore I propose that we what is that word? I need glasses. There we go. Therefore I propose that we replace her spiritual and cultural systems with ours. Therefore I propose that we replace their education system with ours. For if the Indians think that all that is foreign and English is good and greater than their own, then they will lose their self-esteem, their native culture, and they will become what we truly want them to be, a dominated people." When I read that on the wall, I thought, wow, how successful they were. How successful they were in convincing us that everything that was European, that was British, was better. Their culture, their education system, their value system, their moral system, even to the point that what we find as a Muslim community, we oftentimes equate ourselves based on those standards. We weigh our own success based on those standards. We weigh the success and the value of other people based on those standards. And therefore, just that deep-seated self-hatred is what has made us a mentally, spiritually, and literally economically, politically, socially dominated people, individually and collectively. And so it's part of having this month, having this conversation is about how do we reclaim our history? How do we reclaim our values, our story, our heritage, our culture?
Jazakallah khair. MashaAllah. The ayah that comes to mind for some reason, subhanAllah, is قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ تُؤْتِي الْمُلْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتَنْزِعُ الْمُلْكَ مِمَّنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُعِزُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُذِلُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ بِيَدِكَ الْخَيْرُ. And the reason it comes to mind is if we were to truly understand the elements on the foundation of that ayah and our tawheed, that we would understand that believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would mean that the value system is based on that and nothing else. Sheikh Umar, how do you respond to those that say all lives matter?
كلمة حق أريد به باطل. There's a saying, actually, it's actually that, I actually give a khutbah about this statement from Ali radiallahu anhu that when Ali ibn Abi Talib was being confronted by the Khawarij, by that group, and they said, "In al-hukmu illa lillah," that verily the rule only belongs to Allah. Ali radiallahu anhu responded, "It's a statement of truth, but behind it is falsehood." So the intention of it is falsehood. It's only decorated as a true statement. So technically speaking, you know, we had a masjid that put up on their billboard, "All lives matter," and they were like, we thought as we were supposed to be doing. And sometimes, you know, you hear brothers and sisters get really excited and say, "We're here to say Black lives matter, all lives matter." It's like, and they don't understand, why am I upsetting so many people by saying all lives matter? So you need to understand the intent of that statement. Not, I mean, at face value, of course, no one's saying that all lives don't matter. The implication of it is the problem, why it's being said. So let me give you a scenario, okay? Just to give you an example, and again, it's an analogy to understand, all right? Let's say that the IDF just murdered 250 Palestinian children. And then the Palestinians came up with some sort of a slogan to insist upon the meaning of their lives. And then people on the other side, two sides, Israelis said, "Why are you saying Palestinian children's lives matter? All children's lives matter. All lives matter. Why are you assigning value, more value to Palestinian lives and not just saying all lives matter?" Because it's Palestinian lives that are being treated with disdain and devalued. So the statement, "Palestinian lives matter," in that hypothetical scenario, which, by the way, I don't advise anyone else to put anything blank "lives matter," because that would be appropriation of something that's not yours. But in that hypothetical situation would be because a group of people have been unfairly targeted. The quality of their lives is not the same as the quality of the lives of their oppressors. And their deaths are not treated with the same seriousness that the deaths of their oppressors are treated with. So when they say Black lives matter, they're not saying Black lives matter more than white lives or more than other people's lives. They're saying that in a society that has treated Black lives with complete disregard, we need to insist upon the value of Black lives. So a lot of people, I think, well-meaning, by the way, I've heard some ammos use it sometimes, and they thought they were saying the right thing. It's like, no, let me walk you back. Kalimatu haqq, uridu biha batil. Like, the statement is true, but you need to understand where that's coming from. So that's the problem. And you need to understand as well that, let me tell you the way that you shut down a movement for justice. You say, we want to bring both sides to the table and make peace. That's how you whitewash what's been done to the Palestinians too, by the way. And I keep on using that example just because, again, the topic that I was getting is Black Palestinian solidarity. You say, well, we want peace, right? We want to bring them both. Systematically, while you talk about this peace of yours, settlement expansion continues, apartheid's getting worse, more discriminatory laws being passed, more bombardment. I actually had a talk at Howard University before this, and every society you have some people that shout for justice and some people that shout for peace. Those things should not be in contradiction of one another, right? Usually the people that clamor for peace in a society, or with the words peace, that use language like peace and unity and reconciliation, are the people that are trying to brush under the rug all the past crimes and injustices that have been committed, because we don't want tension anymore, let's just move forward. While systematic injustice continues to take place, but peace just means let's keep things nice and, mashallah, things are going well. Why do we have to, let's talk about peace, 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 peace. Both sides, let's bring everyone to the table, both sides. Usually those that clamor for justice are the people that are left behind, and while other people talk about moving forward and the great things in the future, they're living the misery that was created in the past that persists in the present. So the language of both sides and unity and those types of things, yes, we want unity. Of course we want peace. Of course we want unity. Of course we don't want war. Of course we want things to be calm. But not at the expense of justice. Not at the expense of justice. So the same type of language that's used to sedate people so that they don't fight for their rightful cause, for their justice, it's the same language that's employed all around. So the same people that say all lives matter are the same people that believe there's absolutely nothing wrong with our policing in this country. And there's no issue with the way that the suburbs and the ghettos and these things are divided, or the growing wealth gap. They don't care about it. It's like, well, all lives matter. No, we should be about all lives. And the same people that have no issue whatsoever with kids being in cages from Honduras and El Salvador at our southern border will say all lives matter. So that's the point. Understand the context before you reduce it to just a slogan.
We'll start taking questions from the audience. We'll start right here. Brother, just go ahead and stand up and just say a question, and I'll repeat it, inshallah, on the mics. Alaikum salam to Allah. Brother is asking and recounting that we had two crises, it's literally crises in our Commonwealth here, where the governor was discovered to have worn blackface in 1984 in his yearbook picture. And a week later, the Attorney General also admitted to having done the same. So, brothers asking, in this time, how do we address this issue in the context of dignity? Did I get your question correctly? Did you want Sister Aisha or Sheikh Umar? Or both? Aisha first.
Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. The first thing I want to say is that I don't think everybody fully understands what is blackface. And so if you'll give me a moment to explain what it is. When the governor was discovered wearing blackface, there was a particular time in history that white actors in what was called a minstrel show, a traveling show, would actually put black paint on their face to indicate that they were an African American. But by doing so, particularly the darker paint that they would use it to portray like gross stereotypes. So it was used not only to humiliate, but to make deep fun and mockery. And so blackface is known historically for portraying African Americans as lazy, stupid, reckless, with criminal behavior, and in the worst light. So when people would see white Americans putting on blackface, there was an automatic understanding that this person is portraying, and not only, when I say racism, I want to be very clear that that's not, for us to understand racism, we may think of racism as simply, I don't like you, right? I don't like you, I'm prejudiced against you. Racism is different. Racism, because I could hate Saif as much, I don't hate Saif, right, as my brother, but I could hate him, I don't like him. I don't like him because he's Iraqi. I don't like him because he wears a blue suit. I don't like him. But that will not affect Saif's family. It will not affect his job. It will not affect his ability to go get a bank account. It will not affect his ability to get health care. It will not affect where he lives, his ability to get proper housing. It will not affect his education. It will not affect his children, his grandchildren. It will not affect him beyond my own personal dislike. Racism is structural. What it says is, when I don't like you, I will write policies against you. I will create culture that will make other people have ideas about you that are not true. I will make an entire system that entire people will think that you are lazy, incompetent, not capable, uneducated, and have criminal or shifty behavior.
Draw electoral boundaries.
Right. It draws electoral. It will affect your ability to get proper education, get a bank account, get a house where you want to. It will affect your children's ability to be educated. It will affect you for generations to come. This is very different than I simply am prejudiced against you. So when that comes as we don't like this term, so it makes us feel uncomfortable, but the basis in the foundation of racism is white supremacy. The idea of white supremacy means that not only how white you are in skin color, but how European you are. It's a very Hitler idea, right? And so when we understand blackface, what blackface is an outward expression of that structural racism. It's saying, I'm doing it, and it's so fun to me. It's so normative behavior that we could do it at a party, and this is how we joke and game, right? That our entertainment is your degradation. That's what blackface is. And so when the governor put on blackface, and for this to be acceptable behavior amongst his peers, for it to be acceptable behavior in that institution, how do you think institutions like that treated other African Americans? Do you think that they were afforded the same opportunity for education? Do you think they were afforded the same treatment? Do you think that their lives were valued the same? So that's the first aspect of it. Then he's standing next to someone who is in a Klansman suit. A Klansman suit is, I don't want you to think, a Klansman suit is not like a police officer. A Klansman suit is actually where people, this was terrorism 101. This was, we will find you, we will catch you for sport, like we hunt deer. We will find you, catch you, hang you by a noose, set you on fire, and sit and have tea and drink coffee. And tell our children, this is what you do to someone who looks like this. So when we have a governor who engaged in this behavior with his friends and his colleagues at an institution who thought it was an appropriate, no problem picture to put into a yearbook, we have someone who says, I openly identify with white supremacy. I openly and have no problem identifying with the humiliation, the degradation, and the structural racism specifically against black people. So how do we deal with that? We have to get educated. We have to get smart. It's not okay for us to keep kind of brushing it off as kind of, well, boys will be boys, college people, college kids do whatever. Oh, this is no big deal. No, it is 100% a big deal. It is the reason why we are in the situation that we have, everything from mass incarceration to police brutality.
So this is part of listening and learning something, because maybe if you were watching it at home and you don't know the history, like, what's the big deal? He wore a Halloween costume or he did something silly. That's the point of understanding, again, the context of things. I'm going to share with you all two things. I mean, it's actually horrifying to think if we were to actually go back in the history of all of our politicians right now and see what they were doing in the 80s and the 90s and, what these people were up to, it's actually a pretty terrifying thought. And they feast on our ignorance. So in the 1980s, my father actually walks into the masjid and found David Duke speaking in the masjid. How many of you know David Duke? Okay. How many of you watched the movie Black Klansman? All right. David Duke is literally a clan member, right, in Louisiana, politician, the Grand Wizard of the KKK. But David Duke went to the Muslim community and said, guys, you see these Jews taking over the Israeli occupation of Palestine? And he entered into the masjid, and they didn't know who he was. And he gave all these critiques of Israel. Yeah, anti-Semitic, but yani. They're like, he's a white guy that's talking about Israel and talking about the Palestinian cause. My dad walks in and walks up to him, grabs the mic from him and says, get out. Stares him in the eyes, throws him out of the masjid. And like everyone's mad at my dad. Like, why are you throwing this man out? He's white savior. He's coming, he's talking to us about Palestine and he's for us and that kind of stuff. And, so that's knowing the history of a person and knowing why these things happen. It's so important. And this man was literally a grand wizard in the KKK. So finally threw him out of a masjid in the 1980s. In 2008, after Obama was elected president, December 2008, they burned crosses on black families' lawns in New Orleans in predominantly white neighborhoods. And we had to uproot, and subhanAllah was an interfaith coalition that was formed out of that moment of uprooting those crosses. But that's 2008. And then this guy resurfaces to relevance in Charlottesville. And it's not about the tiki torches. It's about the fact that if these people could carry something else, they would. If they could still string up black people on those crosses and burn them, they still would. And they still do in Louisiana. And people are lynched with police bullets now. So there are different types of lynchings. But like you think about the evilness of that. I watched, I don't want to give you guys a spoiler alert, all right, but on that Black Klansman review, I came out traumatized. Because I know David Duke. Like I've literally stared that man in the eyes. You know, like I've seen that terror in his eyes. SubhanAllah, it's so surreal, like 30 years later, and I'm staring him in the eyes. Just like my dad stared him in the eyes before that. We need to know the history. And then that helps us contextualize some of the stuff that happens in our communities and understanding this. Like, what is the issue here? You know, I'll share, there was a brother by the name of Joseph Guillory. I called him Uncle Joe growing up. Joseph Guillory was a convert to Islam. Uncle Joe. He was the first African-American state senator in Louisiana. He became Muslim in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He used to break into libraries to study because they wouldn't allow black people to study in certain libraries. So he went to McNeese, a historically black university. So he then broke into like a better library. He would sneak into the library to study. Became a highly accomplished lawyer. As a kid, as a teenager, he was grabbed by the Klan, drenched in gasoline, and while they were trying to find the matches, he escaped drenched in gasoline from the Klan. This man became Muslim. Now I want you to see this history and why we have to be very careful. We need to really consider, like, do we know the history of the place that we're in right now? Do we understand the history of people here? Do we really get or are we just going to reduce ourselves? We get so frustrated that people are lazy and don't take the time to understand the conflicts in the Muslim world. If you're sitting at home and watching Fox News all the time, you're going to think that the Palestinians are a bunch of roaches that need to be exterminated. They say that stuff, right? You're going to think horrible things. You expect people to take the time to go study the conflict a little bit more and open their eyes. Do the same so that you don't slip up like that. It's important for all of us to do that. I'm taking myself to account. So David Duke doesn't end up with a pulpit in the masjid. Because neocons, by the way, have found places in masjids. Because it was okay for them to target the black community and, you know, have some pretty racist positions, but they wanted to come and shake hands with Muslims and take pictures and stuff like that. We allowed that stuff in many masajid in the country. We've got to stop that. So we've got to know the blackface is a problem, but the racist policy is just as bad as blackface, as you were talking about. So if someone is, you know, implementing racist policy, you want to hold that accountable too. So as Muslims, we just need to be a little bit deeper. And this speaks to, again, not restricting ourselves to certain Muslim issues. Certain Muslim issues. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. And you know, I'll leave it at that. Let's think about, let's go a little bit deeper, inshallah ta'ala, and study the place that we're in, study the history that we're in, study the people, so that we can understand not just the history of these conflicts, the way that they're continuing to play out today in ways that are detrimental to many, many people.
There was a really important point I just wanted to make. In 2007, there was an FBI report that came out that said that there was a mass amount of basically Klansmen and white nationalists who were entering into the police force. And so this report actually reached, you know, the president's desk, upon which it was reissued again in 2011. Basically, the seriousness and the concern that even the FBI had of the amount of what has long been known in the African American community, that they took off hoods and put on uniforms. that in order to be more acceptable in society, they stopped wearing hoods in certain places, and even they put on black robes and became judges. So when we think about it and say, oh, that's what he did then, what it says is when that person then becomes your governor, that's going to be deeply affected, deeply obvious in policies that that person implements.
So, inshallah, jazakallah khair. We're going to take 2 more questions, inshallah. 2 questions. I'll take Sister Ruqayya in the back, and then we'll take this one sister here. But yes, Sister Ruqayya. So the question is, is there any corroboration to that the governor of Mississippi is the current governor of Mississippi, the nephew of Roy Bryant, who was responsible for the murder of Emmett Till, young African American in
Raise your hand if you know who Emmett Till is. That's not enough.
So do you know the?
Please look up Emmett Till. I want you to go home and YouTube lynchings.
Do we know the answer? Do we have any history?
I don't. I actually, I went, subhanAllah, I took my, I can tell you this, subhanAllah, I took my family, we went on a civil rights bus pilgrimage last year in April with our, at that time, 8-year-old and 5-year-old. And we went through Mississippi, Alabama, Atlanta, Arkansas, Memphis, and we actually went to the Mississippi Delta where Emmett Till was, where they have, some of his family members still present there and things of that sort. Went through Selma, Birmingham, Montgomery, all these different places, and knowing, like, what stuck with my daughter, May, was Emmett Till. And a lot of people, subhanAllah, I think about Emmett Till a lot because a lot of people don't understand, and I know you didn't ask the question about that, but I think for the sake of everyone else, Emmett Till was mutilated because he supposedly whistled at a white woman. He was a 14-year-old boy, supposedly whistled at a white woman in Mississippi. And he was mutilated, drowned, horribly mutilated. And his mother had the courage. She said, I want an open casket. I want them to see what they did to my son. That actually spurred the civil rights movement. So just seeing the face of Emmett Till, the way that it looked after that mutilation took place. And I thought, when Jordan Edwards was killed in Dallas, a lot of you don't even know Jordan Edwards' name. It's a beautiful family, honestly. And like what's left over, unfortunately, even though Roy Oliver ended up getting a 15-year sentence, which is not enough. He took the life of a 15-year-old boy. But it was the first time in over 50 years in Dallas that you actually had a prosecution of a cop. Because the facts were just, there was no way he could get himself out of this. I thought that would spur, I thought it would be an Emmett Till moment for America, and it wasn't. It was actually really sad to me that this has become so normal that we move on. Like, we really do move on now. So there's something that maybe as a masjid, halaqah, or youth group, or just as young people or as family, there's a movie called I Am Not Your Negro, James Baldwin, and it's narrated by Samuel L. Jackson. Watch the PBS version, please.
Yes.
But I Am Not Your Negro is a very important, it's because it's really a critique not just of the treatment of black people in America. It's actually a lot to think about in terms of just our culture here, American culture, and why white supremacy functions by constantly reducing everybody and everything around it to subhuman. So it actually gives you a lot of insight and perspective. I mean, one of the first movies I actually sat there and took notes as I was listening to it. Even though it was written by James Baldwin, the correlating images with the voice was very powerful. And he goes through the death of Medgar, Malcolm, and Martin sort of as the backdrop of those scenes. So please do watch that, inshallah ta'ala. It'll give you a lot of perspective on how things are happening now. And the Emmett Till story is very important for us to know so that we can understand where that came out of. Sorry.
Reiterating the PBS version.
Oh yeah, and the woman admitted that she lied later on. So he actually didn't even whistle at a woman, which was the crime that happened.
Also, he was recovering from polio, and and his mother had taught him how to clear his lungs by making that sound. He was clearing his lungs.
By the way, another, I forgot my train of thought actually, so I'll leave it. It'll come back to me, inshallah.
I'll take one more, inshallah, from the sisters here.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Look up Alan Brooks. This is really interesting. In Dallas, in Alan Brooks, 1908, this man was dragged in the streets, lynched in the middle of downtown Dallas, and you see the images. That was made the postcard of Dallas, Texas in 1908. A man lynched in the middle of downtown, and the people got such a crave out of lynching this man. They dragged him in the street, lynched him, that they then went to the trains and tried to find any black person they possibly could in their rage to keep on lynching. Like when you think about people, you know, literally, like what do you do to a people to where you can, you know, how do you look at a people to where that can be justifiable to you? So you think about the public nature of these lynchings and the children. What always shocks me in the images of lynchings is that there are children that are sitting there watching. And it looks like people are having a picnic, like they're unfazed by it. It becomes normalized. So I think let's just pay attention to the dehumanization factor here. How much easier is it to dehumanize people when people are becoming increasingly reliant on the internet and on their screens to tell them about the world around them? It's a scary thought. You know, and that's where you get the Uyghurs and the Rohingya too. Millions of people that can be put in concentration camps. And, you know, the reality is that a lot of people in their minds are thinking that's horrible that 3 million Muslims are in concentration camps, but they actually kind of agree that Islam is a mental disease, a mental illness, and people, they couldn't integrate them into society, and maybe they do need to have their beards shaved and alcohol and forced down their mouths in Ramadan. A lot of people, that languaging actually resonates with them. They just haven't gone to the point yet of concentration camps, right? But that's an important point, that what's the programming that leads to that inevitable, that point where violence is normal against the people?
So very quick addition to what Sheikh Umar just mentioned is there was a study that recently ran nationwide, but there was a focus on the Northern Virginia area, which we consider to be a metropolitan area that's quite diverse. And we discovered that the attitude toward Muslims in this area is actually worse than it is elsewhere.
Texas?
Even in Texas. Shahid, what about Texas? This area was worse than Texas.
Wow.
Yes, and this was a study done by New America Foundation. It was sponsored by American Muslim Institution. Al-Hijrah helped with this study. And this area had worse attitudes, and this just goes to show you of the way that the media and other methods go towards framing debates and discussions. I'll take that sister right here. Yes.
I just wanted to say, first of all, Jazakallah khair for having this panel. I wanted to share something that I'm a Jewish convert from a Zionist family, from a practicing Jewish family. I'm a recent convert to the deen. So what I'm asking on a personal level is, and I guess for the Muslim community as well, do you have any advice as to how to go through that? How do you go through those questions of trying to combat racism and dehumanizing, whether it's Palestinians or African Americans or Muslims or anything? How would you have that conversation to try to basically educate in a way where they can actually listen and understand, as opposed to just being like, oh, well, we don't agree with that. Do you have any advice as to what we can do to educate?
Who wants to tackle that first?
I actually, first of all, may Allah bless you. Congratulations, and welcome to the Deen and the community. It's very brave and bold, and subhanAllah, I actually had the opportunity to work very closely with an Israeli convert that whose family was actually trying to kill her, and for being Muslim and things of that sort. I think that what you're talking about, how do you, are you talking about with your family, with people in the community, and talking about Zionism and talking about the treatment of Palestinians, or are you talking about in general?
Well, on a personal level, how do I speak to my family about that? And I guess as like a larger, as a Muslim Ummah question, how do we basically educate people about what's really going on and how to eradicate the racism and like dehumanization of any group of people?
Sure. So the first thing is that the best way to try to get someone to understand the plight of someone else is to try to walk them into their shoes. So to try to talk them, like, imagine through the cycle. It's actually very effective when you have someone's ear and you have their attention to take them from a step one to a step two, and then take them through the journey of that person. It's actually very effective when you're talking about the immigrants right now that are seeking asylum from El Salvador and Honduras. Like, what would you do, right? And then sort of walk them through that entire process and what happens to them when they get to the border and so on and so forth. So I think that you're in a unique position to talk to them and to sort of try to, inshallah ta'ala, walk them through that journey, right, as a person. And at the end of the day, Allah is the one that guides. So I think you need to humanize those that have been dehumanized, and you now have personal experience. I'm assuming you've met Palestinians in Al-Hijrah, right? So you have a personal experience. It's sort of walking people down that road, right? Humanizing the dehumanized. I think that's the most important and effective way.
So, in conclusion, inshallah, I want the brothers and sisters that are on our civic engagement team at the masjid to stand up if you're here. Brother Abdul Razak, you already stood up. You can stand. You can stay standing. Fazia, is Sister Munya back there? Ustad Ahmed, I think they left. They were helping to set up along with the comms team and everyone else. So may Allah reward our brothers and sisters in the comms team, everyone who volunteered. May Allah doubly reward Sister Aisha for wrangling our Sheikh Umar to come to Dar al-Hijrah. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless, to guide, to keep on the straight path, to keep humble and strengthened our Sheikh Umar in his endeavors and in the endeavors that he is doing at Yaqeen, which is making phenomenal strides in providing knowledge and education to the Muslim community in the United States. Brothers and sisters, it is so essential that we understand the foundations of our deen, because it's not for you and me. It's for our grandkids and the generations that come thereafter. So this knowledge is so essential so that we can make sure that this community continues to thrive, bi'idhnihi ta'ala, as a light for our society.
I need to add one more thing.
Tafadhal.
How many of you have downloaded the Yaqeen app? It's free. Everything we do at Yaqeen, alhamdulillah, is free. We've committed to each and every single publication, video, infographic, media, resource, educational resources, building curriculum, engaging quizzes, things of that sort. We're customizing curriculum for youth groups, customizing curriculum for Islamic schools, customizing toolkits for khutbahs, for media, for policymakers, and we don't charge a dime for it. All we ask is that you engage with the content and make dua for us, inshallah ta'ala. So please download the app tonight before you leave, inshallah ta'ala. Just go ahead and start the download. And inshallah, please do continue, make dua for us, follow us, and engage the content and spread as much of it as you can. Jazakallah.
Barakallah bik. And before we close, every Thursday night here in the library is when the civic engagement team at the masjid meets. And I would be remiss if I don't tell you what we're working on, because this is our program. The major thing we're working on right now is affordable housing, because this is a very important issue. The other thing is criminal justice reform. We are working on what's called bail reform in our community, because this is something that's essential. Alhamdulillah, we were able to get the governor, yes, that same governor, to raise the felony threshold from 200 to 500. We're shooting it to go up to 1,000. And I want you to understand why it's important, because in Fairfax County, the African American population is less than 10%. But in Fairfax County, the African American population represents up to 30% of the prison population. And no, if you're thinking they do more crimes, that's not the case. There's no incidence of difference in crime rates. There's a structural issue going on there. And this is part of what we're trying to change, not just because this is a Muslim issue, but as Sheikh Umar said, this is a justice issue. So Thursday nights after Isha, we meet in the library, and we're going to also be working on some school board issues, bi'idhni ta'ala. So please join us. Jazakumullahu khairan. Subhanaka rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.